Hello, I'm Alex Jonathan Brown, Principal Content Strategist at Iron Horse. Welcome to Full Steam, and I'll be honest, there has never been a weirder time to have my job or any job that's focused on content or writing or really sort of marketing in general. And the reason it's so, we'll say, confusing is because of AI. There are so many questions. Should we be using AI? If we are, how should we use it? What are the long-term impacts it's going to have on the way marketing works, and then specifically all the work that people like me do? There's a lot going on right now. And to help answer some of those questions and maybe ask some newer, better ones, on this episode, we've got my boss, Amber Keller, content director here at Iron Horse. We dive into everything, or at least as much as we can get to in our allotted time. It's a really good conversation. You'll learn a lot about how she and I are both thinking about AI individually, and then really how we're using it at Iron Horse, and the things that are making sense for us now. Hopefully you'll get a little bit of an idea on how you can use it in your organization as well. So I'll stop talking, I'll get out of the way, and we'll get Amber in here. But enjoy the conversation. Hi, Amber. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Alex. Nice to be here.
I say us because I feel like that's the thing that you should say. It's me. It's me and you right now. Thanks for taking the time. But the goal for this little full steam conversation, I think, is to just get a sense of what our jobs look like now that we are in an AI world. And I guess maybe the easiest place to start. So if you're not super familiar with the Iron Horse internal workings, Amber's my boss. Content director is your official title, is that right?
It is.
Great. So just talk a little bit about what all that means to kind of set a little bit of the context for your viewpoint on this conversation. What's a day look like for you in 2026?
Sure, yeah. Well, my role here at Iron Horse is twofold. So I'm thinking primarily about our clients and their content, and how they can use content to get noticed, get discovered, get chosen, through basically the whole funnel. And then I also lead this amazing team of writers, which Alex is on, to be able to do the same, and also produce all of the great content that Iron Horse creates for marketers to help them do their jobs better.
And so you're amazing and incredible at all of those, and working with you is truly a delight. Also, it means you've got kind of the AI conversation happening on a lot of different vectors, I guess. There's
Totally.
What are we doing internally? What's the Iron Horse stance on it? But then also, lately, it feels like every conversation that we have with clients, especially early on, especially at the top level, especially during things like discovery or like those kickoff calls, like the AI conversation, if it's not direct, is very much in the air around that. The questions of like, okay, who's comfortable with what? How much do we want to use it? What do our processes and flows look like? So maybe a good place to start is just like, first off, I guess, am I correct in that those... It feels to me very much like AI is a part of these conversations, and it's sort of always around now. Is that also your feeling in your experience?
Absolutely. I mean, it's everywhere, right? It's how can we use AI to make us better, to make what we do better? How can our clients use AI to make what they do better? How are buyers using AI, and how does that entirely change the way that we market to them? And then as writers, I mean, we're always thinking about the world that we are operating in is just flooded with AI content, AI generated content, and a lot of it's terrible. And so it's this idea of how do you resist that? How do you stand out amongst that? How do you show up when people are using AI to do their research and look different and still write interesting things, write things that people need to know, still love your job as a writer? I mean, that's a big part of it too, right? So it really is everywhere.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting parts of this is because, again, as writers and content people, it's very easy for us to like go into the like, well, what about me? How does this affect me? But one of the biggest changes that we've seen and that we talk about a lot really is the idea of this has changed the way that people do research, and also it's changed what the internet looks like in general. So I want to talk a little bit about the research chunk of that first before we dive too deep into like the what about us angle of all of this. But for a long time, I think the flow was okay. Like if you look at the content marketing general like best practices, it was how do I create a piece of content that people are going to search out so they come to my website so I can, if we're going back 10 years now, so I can throw a cookie on them somewhere and then I can track everything that they do and then I can market to them down the road. And really, I think one of the things that AI has done has been like, wait, what if they never get to your site? What if all of their research happens in the AI window or in the AI client? And so it's almost like there's a chance that the only thing our audience is going to see is basically an executive summary of what we've written that's been generated by Claude or ChatGPT. And I'm really interested in how we're all starting to think about what that means for the work and how that changes the way the work works. And that's not a real question, but if you like have any thoughts you want to hop in there, go for it.
I think one of the things that's really fascinating for me about this whole shift in where people are doing their research is so there's some things you don't have control over, right? They're getting information. Their AI engine is pulling from reviews and conversations on Reddit or whatever that hopefully you're not actually sitting in and trying to control, but are actually organic. So those things you don't have a lot of control over. But the rest of the information that they're getting is still from your writing. And in some ways, the end result of what they get might be a roll-up, a sort of executive summary of the research that this answer engine has or LLM has performed. But you have to have really good, thorough writing to inform that. And I think that's kind of fascinating because in the old way, you never really knew if anybody was going to read all of those pieces. You're kind of throwing things out there, hoping like, okay, the person who's interested in this will get this, and the person who's interested in this will find this. And if somebody wants to go deep, I'm going to have something for them or to support my nurture or whatnot. But now you can assume, if you are getting found by that answer engine or that LLM, that it is reading the whole body of work. And that's just a really interesting thing to think about. I mean, there's a lot of nuances and things that we don't really know how they work into whether, does it throw away what it read or does it value what it read? Does it, which pieces does it pull from? Does the whole body of work matter? Or is it just this piece over here that answers that specific question that the user's looking for? But you also, in some ways, have more opportunity to influence that really thorough researcher. right? Than you do with when it's a human researcher who might give up or who might not look at as many sources when they're doing their work.
It's almost like, so especially when the AI, when ChatGPT rolled out and there were all the conversations, especially in like more creative spaces about, oh, the bad thing that it's doing is that it's stealing my novella and like it's using that to inform the way it writes. Whereas on the corporate side of things, it's sort of like that's the goal. Like, please steal these ideas and use them, and like carry them out into the world. I love the idea that like there's so much writing where the question always was like, is this going anywhere or is this just sitting on our blog? And does the reach of this depend on whether on the marketing team's budget to promote this on LinkedIn?
Right.
And just the way that might shift and might start showing up in other places. One of the things that I've sort of become obsessed with as like my little pet concept lately is I think it's so important now to like be branding concepts in your content. With the idea of like if AI is gonna like read my little blog post and like adopt its ideas, if I'm doing a framework that has a name or if I'm doing a process that has a name, like my hope is that name also gets picked up. So then when somebody wants to learn more about it, even if they don't see like an inline citation within the AI, like the thing that they're looking for is the name that I created. And then like that's a little hook. So yes, it's a wild time to be thinking about any of this stuff. I wonder if you have a take on how it's changing the way that buyers or prospective buyers interact with these ideas. I know for a long time, like there was the idea of like, if you get to my blog post, like you're going to read it and then I know what I want you to take away. I'm not 100% sure you're going to get there. And if people are using AI heavily for research, like I wonder how much of that process of finding the interesting part about this kind of gets moved away, or if it just gets more important for us as writers to like really underline, no, these are the takeaways. This is what I want you to learn, robots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question, and I think it depends on what the goal of the piece of content is. So definitely, if it's a like a thought leadership, insights, a new way of thinking that you're putting out there. Well, we were talking about this internally, and whether the key takeaways that you want to roll up and make sure AI gets, is it a blow by blow of what was in the content? Is it a summary, or is it the main idea that you wanted to get across? Sidetracking a little bit, I think an interesting way to find out what AI is taking away from it, and then maybe answer that question for yourself, is to ask your favorite AI tool. Ask Claude to summarize your piece of writing. Ask it to pull the key takeaways. And I mean, it's both an exercise in did I get into this article what I wanted to get into it? Does AI work the way I think it does? Because there's a little bit of that too, right? And also, like, maybe that helps you clarify, what do I want somebody to take away from this? I think, for me, we've done some experiments using, AI to help us with lots of different processes internally. And one of the things that we get when we're working with clients is, a massive amount of documentation to learn all of the ins and outs of their business and their strategy and all that kind of stuff. And keeping track of all of those documents and making sure that we have the newest ones and we know which ones are kind of useful and for what is time consuming and also super important. And so we've done experiments with like, hey, instead of having a human go in there and populate this spreadsheet and saying what's most important about this, asset, so that I can decide if that's the one I want to look into later. We've had AI do it. And what happens is AI is very literal with the summaries. It'll give you a spreadsheet and say, well, this is a marketing plan and it includes columns for the audience and the industry. And I mean, this is worthless. This is not helpful at all. It's not at all what I need to get from this summary. And I think that kind of speaks to the point that you're making. But the bigger question is if somebody's doing research and that's what the tool they're doing research with, their, artificial assistant now is taking away from the stuff you wrote, it doesn't help you at all and it doesn't help them at all. So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but I do think there's value in maybe putting what you want the AI to get out of it and the human to get out of it explicitly into like your key takeaways.
No, I think that's great, and I'm not 100% sure it was actually a question. So I think you nailed it. But I think that brings up a really interesting point too. Of there is this balance of how much are we writing for the like AI version of the funnel, right? Which maybe doesn't wind up on our website. And how much are we still writing for that traditional model of, the goal ultimately is the same, but in one version, we really want somebody to like read through a thing that we wrote and like have an enjoyable experience and learn something and then be moved to action. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that is like, it's not like quality of life stuff, but it is just, I think when you're writing with the idea of a person in mind, it can change the way that things work. One example that I know we've talked about is the idea of what do headers do in your blog post now? I am very much I have a minor in creative writing background where I'm like, okay, I want to use headers to like signpost what's coming next, but also if I have a blog-wide metaphor that I've been working on, I want to make sure that they tie into the metaphor and like move you along. And then for AI, often you see that just being like, here's the question that we're going to answer in the next 3 paragraphs, and we're just going to write the question. So as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about content in these contexts, like where are you at with all of this? Like, who are we writing for when we're writing in 2026?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it goes back again to, well, if you think about your audience and what is their intention or need when it comes to the information that they're getting from you. And we're so focused on this again, LLM agentic enabled research, right? Well, that's great. When I'm researching, when I want like, hey, give me the best itinerary for this trip I'm going on, or help me find an out of the way spot that no one's been to before except 3 people on TripAdvisor, or help me find a product that's going to actually solve my problem. I think, having a tool go in and finding those answers very explicitly in your stuff and packaging it up in a nice little report of this is why this is good and this is why this one isn't is super, super helpful. And that's when we're writing for the machine. People can use that too, right? Like that's helpful if you're using a tool to help you there with your research, or if you're doing that research on your own. Who wants to sift through, a whole bunch of stuff to try to compile that information? But there's this whole other part of writing and reading and buying that is the part where you're not ready to buy and you are just learning and appreciating companies that are putting out good content, people that are putting out interesting content. I mean, we are writers, and writing has survived because humans are storytellers and humans are story consumers. We love writing, right? We love to read. Not everybody wants to read all the time. Not everybody wants to read to get information, but we love that act of reading. And I don't think that's going to change in a fundamental way where that goes away. And the content that you're talking about, like that really voicey, interesting article, where you're carrying me forward in your narrative with your interesting headings, is for that stage in the journey. And I think it's a really important stage for a lot of types of businesses out there, because yes, there are the people that are like doing their research and then they're finding you on their short list at the very end and they're ready to buy, and they never heard of you before that. But there's also all of the people that have developed an affinity for your organization and your thinkers, and because they've been following you for a long time. And that includes reading your content, whether it's little blips on LinkedIn or longer articles or your newsletters or whatever. And that's where voice is still going to matter, and not having everything feel exactly the same, like a question and answer, because that's boring in that case.
I haven't thought about this before, and I thought about it during your answer, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, so I'll let you tell me. But it's almost like, so if we were talking about a restaurant and not often B2B companies, it's the difference between getting your restaurant listed in like a tourist guide or like a guide for travelers, versus getting like the word to mouth organic buzz kind of thing, where I feel like the LLM stuff is saying, okay, this is how we're going to get you into the guide. So if somebody knows they want a restaurant and doesn't know where to go, you're going to show up in the places where they're looking. Versus the
and answer all those questions, like how easy
exactly.
is it for me to get a table, right?
Exactly. What
Do
are
I
the
need
hours?
yeah. Can my kid come or whatever?
100%. Versus the other stuff that you were talking about of the somebody who's not in market yet, maybe, like that's more of the, hey, I've heard about this really cool spot that you should check out.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so it's almost, and I sort of hesitate to say this, but it's almost like if you're at the stage where somebody's doing the AI research to like cold, basically,
Yeah.
you've missed the chance to do the other stuff. Because if the organic stuff had like been working, hopefully you're top of mind when it comes to that. Maybe they're using the AI to like back up some of that. It's the Google search to figure out when the restaurant's open before you head out the door, right?
Yeah.
But that raises an interesting question then of balancing those two things. So is there, I guess, do you have a stance of like, are we writing separate content for both of these? Are we saying that this blog post is for the LLMs, we'll let them find it, it'll be there, and this blog post is the super voicey like metaphors about restaurants, that we want like somebody to find in a newsletter or find through social or like maybe share in Slack? Or are we trying to do both of those at the same time? That's also sort of an AEO question, but I don't know that anyone has those answers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't think it's as clear cut as that, but I definitely don't think you're always trying to do it all in one piece. So I think there are things, and I think, thinking about who's going to read this, what's going to read this, is important, but I think it's that's more important from the perspective of like knowing how like what I was talking about before, like knowing how the AI actually parses that information. Because when it comes down to it, it's more about the goal of the content, or what purpose it's answering. So in the example that you gave, the with the restaurant, it doesn't really matter actually if it's a roll up that somebody got in their travel guide, or they found an FAQ on the restaurant's website themselves, right? It doesn't matter if you get that information through an LLM because you're really comfortable with doing your research that way, or you haven't gotten there yet and you get that information yourself by finding that exact piece of content. The content, having the structure in the content, having the clear answers in the content, that's what matters, right? And you have to know how to do it in a way that the AI engine can read it and get what you want out of it. But generally, in that kind of really structured case, in that case of really structured information, that's fine for the human. Or if you do it for the LLM, the human will also appreciate it, and vice versa in a lot of the ways. That other piece of writing that you're talking about, again, in some ways, that could also be for an LLM, but only if the LLM is answering the question, what are people saying is the coolest restaurant in Portland right now, right? Or which restaurant has the most creative approach to how they plate their food, or whatever, something. So it's just it's a different need that you're serving, and I think in that case, I think that's actually a very good analogy, right? Because people might look up that stuff about a restaurant, get those kind of practical logistical questions answered, and still navigate over to like Google reviews, or some other, in Portland, the Willamette Week or Eater, or something that, has more voice to it and gives more scrumptious details about the food, for that vibe check and make sure it's really the place that they want to go to. And that's kind of the same as using your LLM and then eventually heading over to the website or the LinkedIn or whatever, and maybe picking up and reading that piece of content that you can get there at the end or at the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, it's all incredibly we'll go with interesting. I think it's a really interesting time to be doing this work. The one thing that I don't hear either of us saying is that the ways that AI have been thrown into the mix over the last few years have made our job boring or worse. I don't think that's at all the case, but I do think it's changed the way a lot of it works. And I think it's a federal crime if I have this conversation without talking about the ways that AI has changed the actual writing that we do. I know that we are constantly, unfortunately, on M-Watch these days of there is this, for good or bad and correct or incorrect, there is a perception that audiences, if they assume that content is AI generated, will react poorly to that. And as such, I think we've all tried to write a little bit less AI, whatever that means, even if it's just coming out of our brain and we just know how punctuation works. So I'm wondering, for that super day-to-day, just putting out content scope of things, how has AI being around this much changed the way you think about grammar and content on that scale?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm just going to say it's rough. I don't think we have to pretend that being a writer and having AI generated content, taking all of the tools that you used to use to write well, and and then putting them out there so that every single piece of thing that you see anywhere that you look feels exactly the same. It's rough. So I mean, we've constantly, it's not just watch, like, we have been scrutinizing our own writing and taking out formats and structures that are actually really good. It's not this, it's that. I'm sorry, Alex, I was editing some of your work yesterday, and I was like, we don't need comparisons anymore. We can just say what it is.
You can just say what it is.
Right? But comparisons are incredibly helpful for understanding something. But I also, like, my eyes glaze over now when I see one of those comparisons. I'm just like, I don't even trust that the information is from the heart, or because I know it's been crafted by AI, and I can't even trust that it's correct in a way, or that that's what the person wanted to say. So I think, I mean, the positive side of that is, okay, let's push ourselves to find a new creative way to write. How are we gonna stand out? Forget the comparisons for a while. Forget the punchy short sentences for a while. We'll come back to that in a few weeks or months when the AI has picked up on whatever other trend or thing that we've been doing in its place. I think we were looking at an article and talking on our team about an article that was in The Atlantic in the last week about people intentionally putting typos into their work to make it more authentic, which is something that maybe I had subconsciously been noticing, or I had just been thinking about for a little while. And it's such a funny conversation for writers who, many of us maybe value punctuation rules more than the rest of the public anyway. And, like, did anybody even know what an M dash was before? Did most people know what an M dash was and what it was called before AI took over? And so for writers to be going out there and, breaking grammar and leaving in typos simply so that people know we wrote it, it's wild.
It's There was a time when the reason why you would put a recipe at the start of your or a personal essay at the start of your recipe is because you wanted people to know why this grilled cheese meant so much to you. And then it just became, this is what we do now. And I think there's so much.
It was fresh and interesting, right?
Exactly.
In the beginning. Because the people who were doing it had interesting stories, and you were like, oh, I want to read, food is life. I want to read all of these connections. And then, as you say.
And then it's like, just give me the recipe. I don't care. I'm sure your grandma was great, but I just want the tomato soup. And I think that is constantly a moving target, and it's very tricky. I think one of the things that I think it does is it devalues the, like, middle tier of, or I guess central tier, let's not put a value on it, but of that kind of, like, I'm trying to be sort of fun and, like, sort of interesting. Of, like, if you're not going so far in one direction of really being like, yeah, I turned this in at the creative writing department of my local public college, it is just sort of like, maybe we just get straight to the point and only talk about the things that, like, we really need to talk about. I think it is another thing too, where, like, being in the B2B space, there's never been a ton of room for the super voicey stuff anyway. And so we would try to, like, vaguely work it in, and now I think we're seeing that a lot of that is feels more in the way than it has before, because we know that, like, the 5 out of 10 version of it can easily be replicated by these LLMs, And so like if you prompt something with like make this sound human and like
Mhm.
make it sound personable, well, it turns out that a lot of that starts to look like the oh, I put care into this, but I was rushed space of stuff of just like
Mhm.
it's not you're not really breaking through in the way of like of it being a really really like straight from my brain focused like piece of
Yeah.
that voicey content. The
Yeah.
mid space has gotten very interesting. Is this? Oh, I know we're coming up on time, so I'll wrap this up. But do you think we're gonna get to a space where, and we see some of this already with people like Gary Vaynerchuk, who are just like, my brand is that I'm 100% me, and I'm gonna do my swears or whatever. Do you think, especially in like thought leadership pieces, that we'll get to a space where the idea is this should be as rough and like sort of not sloppy, but like as organic as possible to
Mhm.
like avoid that is this just AI slop stench, or if we do that 6 months from now, is that what the AI looks like anyway? Like, do you have a take? I don't know. My take
Will the AI
for
start
the
doing that?
record.
That I would like to see that actually. I think that would be really funny if we start seeing the AI generated stuff look so casual and kind of mistakey and sloppy. I don't know if AI can do that because it's at least my sense of it from what I've seen is it's sort of it trends toward the over polished in every
Yeah.
situation, which is exactly the thing that you're talking about. I'm not. That might be part of the way that it's brain, the way that they're built,
Mm.
and not just I saw this and I'm replicating it. Um, because it does it in every single way. It just totally has that flattening
Mm-hmm.
effect. I don't know if this is going to answer your question. I do actually really like the idea of people, especially thought leaders or whatever, going out on LinkedIn or writing blogs or doing videos that are a little more sloppy, but not sloppy to be sloppy. Not sloppy because I just have a few minutes, but um, not taking so much time to really work out all of the kinks in what you're thinking. Be a little bit more real, especially right now where everything is changing every week or 2 weeks anyway. So, I'm not saying go as far as having typos or have your thoughts be unfinished. There's still some crafting that kind of needs to happen there, but it doesn't have to be so crafted and polished. And so I think that if this isn't really exactly what you're asking, but I think the people that are doing that right now are that's where you're where I lean in at least,
Mm-hmm.
where I see something interesting, and I don't think it stands out. It does stand out because it's not over polished, but also the ideas come out better because it's not over polished. The there's that yeah, whatever, the sloppiness in the thinking or a little bit of nuance or a little bit of trying to figure out what you're saying, and that's actually quite accessible for people in a way that sort of really polished writing starts to just sound like buzzwords.
I I'm really glad you threw buzzwords in at the end there, because I think maybe the thing that is incredibly true is that AI is very good at sounding like people when they are trying to sound like brands. And
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
it's very not good at sounding like people who are like being people.
People.
And I mean, would it be interesting to like ask AI to put the word like where I naturally put like in sentences and like see if that works? I have no idea if it would do that correctly or not, but I
It
think
could though,
that's
because it can study, right? But it still doesn't
sure.
feel it's not where a linguist can do that too.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, somebody who studies semantics can do that too. It it's not about the exact placement. It's about the way that natural ideas come out and how they come out in natural language. And I don't know that you can do that. You can study that and replicate that, because once it's out there, it's every time you do it, it's new, right?
Exactly. This has been a fantastic conversation. We are up against our heart out. I know we could do this for another half hour if we wanted to.
Entirely.
Amber, I guess just moving forward, if we were doing a optimistic about the future of all this, neutral, or pessimistic about the future of all this, where would you fall?
Ooh, oh, that's tough.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
I can go first if you want, real quick.
what's that?
I can go first if you want, real quick. And give you a second.
Uh, I'm going to say optimistic because I think that humans fundamentally like freshness. And so I don't see us ever getting to a place where we are happy with, um, just a repetitive sort of cycle of the way things are communicated.
I'm optimistic as well. I think it's a really interesting time to be trying to figure these problems out. And for so long, I think our jobs as content people was mostly how do we come up with new and interesting ways to do the exact same thing, just move people down a content funnel. And this has really been sort of a curveball of like, oh, you have new problems to figure out, and brands have new problems to figure out. And I think they're really big, interesting questions that take a lot of smart people to wrap our heads around. So, Amber, I'm so glad to get to work with you and get to work on these problems together. Thanks for taking the time. Anything else you want to throw in there before we wrap up
No.
this full steam? Awesome. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
much.
the great questions.
And we'll have you back on soon. So, like I said, we covered a lot of ground. It's so great to get to talk to Amber about all this stuff. We'll definitely have her back on soon and probably continue the conversation a little bit. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about what me and Amber are doing over at Iron Horse, along with the rest of the team, you can visit our website, ironhorse.io, or you can stay tuned to wherever you're watching this for the next episode of Full Steam. Until then, for Amber, I'm Alex Jonathan Brown, reminding you to get out there, get discovered, and get chosen. We'll talk to you again soon.